Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Emerald City Creatives. Thank you so much for joining us. Today I have Fee. Fee is a queer lust writer and coach teaching LGBTQIA writers how to go about writing queer lust stories and reframe what they've been told so they can combat the shame that comes with something natural, which is lust, and writing stories that connect them with themselves. But she also explores what could be when queer bodies are fully loved, pleasured, explored. She is the founder of Queer Lust Stories, and actually, last month was hosting a workshop exploring queer lust and helping writers write and craft their stories. Fee, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I am so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Awesome. And what I wanted to ask is, and I kicked this off with everyone, what word describes your artistic journey at this moment?
Mm. Somehow the word elderhood, eldership, just
Okay.
yeah, it's just becomes present. Um, and especially as I was also writing my own queer lust stories with each workshop that happened, I'm seeing that I have like 4 decades behind. And so there's this very expansive like fabric of my life to dip into and to look at. And I'm particularly noticing like this sense of like more peace with my journey, especially around queerness and coming out later in life, which I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, so somehow the word elderhood and kind of like chilling into my elderhood is coming up.
But much, especially because, well, okay, I mentioned this is before we start the recording. One of the spaces I'm in is a queer, well, both are queer art galleries, but in one space we are like, I just came in and they are realizing like, hey, when it comes to like elderhood and tapping into the stories, we're not doing that. And we had QT BIPOC elders come in and share their stories. We're here in the US, and so they're able to share their stories on things that were not passed down to us, and they're able to tap into all of that. And this is like going back to like the AIDS crisis here in the US and what they face firsthand. And so I like the fact that you mentioned that and tapping into it, because I realize I'm right there at I'm approaching the 40. It's come the 40 decades. It's coming a lot quicker than what I realized. It feels like someone snapped their fingers. I'm like, oh, hey, it's coming up. And I'm realizing I'm at the point where there's things that I could pass on that I experienced firsthand that this next gen just don't have. So no, I love that word. I love that. Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask then, what got you into writing queer lust stories, especially like if you came out later in life? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I have been writing for 20 plus years. I came out at 35. I came out the same day that I left my straight marriage because it was like I was bursting. I had to do like all the things. So that happened. But when it came to writing about like my queer, like even my queer journey, but then also like that includes queer desire, right? They go hand in hand to a great extent. I would keep getting stuck. So I'd start a piece or I'd be like, I'm starting my memoir. Like it has to happen. It's like bursting to come forward. But then a few paragraphs in, things would peter off and my chest would get tight and I wouldn't know what to do. And part of it was that when we write personal stories, we've lived through life. And now, again, we talked about elderhood. So there's 4 decades to look at. It gets real overwhelming real fast. And I didn't have any. So it ended up being like a laundry list of, remember that look from that girl? Remember that moment? And then it just felt like my inner critic was like, "Well, you look at this laundry list, like, why didn't you know that you were queer so much sooner?" And then I would collapse from the shame, from all these voices in my head being like, "You should have known sooner. You shouldn't have stayed married in a straight marriage for so long." And for a long time, I was stuck in this like start stop cycle of I really want to write about this. I would start, and then the shame in my case would collapse me. And then, I kept writing other things. I kept teaching writing workshops, healing workshops. And just last year, Queer Lust Stories landed in my lap, like, literally through ancestors. So, I had offered to host a storytelling night because there was a new queer bar that opened up in Chinatown here in Vancouver, and I was like, "You know what? I can help out community, let me host something, I've done that for a long time." And it was, like, around Halloween, so I was like, "What about, like, scary love stories? Ha, ha, ha." And I was gonna go with that. But then I was sitting at my altar one night and this voice just said, "Queer lust stories." And I put it out and it went as viral as I've ever gone. Like people were like signing up to be storytellers, all of this. And then my own shame came in of like, again, those inner voices of who are you to talk about queer lust? You came out a hot second ago, which isn't true at all at this point. You're Pakistani. What would your family say? Like, you shouldn't talk about these things. And that backlash was so intense. But luckily, like, the event had taken on a life of its own. So it was too late to back out. And it's just become this like dual thing of like, because I really carry the feeling of, like, how hard this can be and the shame and the, like, cultural shit, I carry that really close so I can show up in a certain way and hold space for the other folks and the other storytellers. You know, like yeah, like, just experiences are different, so and, like, in my case, like, disabled and queer and immigrant, so, like, I have those marginalized identities in me, and so it just opens up the space for others to feel more comfortable, to feel like, "Yeah, this stuff is messy to write about, it is hard to write about," and yeah, it happened, and then it just the first storytelling night was so powerful, like, people shared things that were quite intimate. I'm getting goosebumps just remembering. And it was a queer bar. So everyone else was queer too. And that in itself made it so much easier to talk about because you know that what you're saying is gonna be received by at least some people in the audience. And from there, it's just grown into this really like wholesome, like workshop container where we do several weeks worth of a workshop, whether you want to perform or not. Like some people just want to explore this for themselves, which is great. And then sometimes there's like a performance element, and each of those things is just really fun, beautiful, like people go deep inside, but then they come out with something that they weren't expecting for themselves. So it's just become such a beautiful container.
I love it. That's amazing, especially because it goes back to, again, where I'm at. I didn't grow up hearing a lot of queer love stories.
Yeah.
I still remember on TV, as soon as queer love stories would pop up, it felt like the nation would just split. There was, I think, Hayden Panettiere and I forgot her name. She played Gracie in The Nanny, but they were on this TV show called Heroes. And there was like a whole marketing campaign around, we're going to feature two women kissing on TV. It's going to be huge. And everywhere from news to my friends at school were like, oh my gosh, this is huge. And I'm like, it's in retrospect, I'm like, it's kind of sad. Like something
Yeah.
so basic and just so natural. It's enough to like divide a nation. But we're also like, again, I'm in the US. We're going through our stuff right now.
Oh, yeah. And I lived in the Bay Area for a long time. I should have told you earlier. And I was in Oakland for a long time, and that's where
Okay.
I got to come into my queerness in the most like, I can't imagine a better place to, like, ease into and, like, flesh out into your queerness, and it's also where I was able to, like, understand, like, the complexity of the queer, trans, like, all of it experience, but the thing you just said, right, of, like, how big a deal, like, media will make of a kiss, and, like, this is us being in probably 2 slightly different generations, 'cause I remember when that happened on, like, maybe Will and Grace or something, there was
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, and I was and so what happened for me was, A, like, I took the message that only, like, white people from, like, America, because I grew up in Canada, so only white
Yeah.
men from America can be gay, right? That was my basic message that I took in. But I think also what happens when they make such a big deal of this is, like, you're making it an othering, right? It's an othering to
Yeah.
be like, well, if two female-bodied people are gonna kiss, let's make it a big deal, and then under the umbrella of that, let's make it a divisive, like, as if you get to have an opinion on it, versus
Yes.
all the sloppy kisses we have to watch of, like, other people going at it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's all
And
behavior.
it's exactly that. And honestly, it still feels very much like within queer spaces, it is to a white, like, if you're white and queer, yes, like, it's for you. You see yourself reflected, but I still feel othered.
Yeah.
Also, just to give some background on me, I see you're from the Bay. Like, I'm also from California. I'm from Bakersfield, if you
Okay.
know it.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, I know the Bay. Like, I have family up there. So it's, if that could have been where I came out, that would have been great.
Mhm.
But what I want to ask then, when it comes to her less stories, what is it like, or I guess, what is it like, not just creating, but protecting spaces in which it can be shared?
Yes. I mean, I learned this more and more each round of workshops and each event that we host is like, protecting in terms of like just putting systems into place, including what I just said of like, you are more than welcome to come into the workshop, which runs for like 5 weeks, and you get to come into the workshop whether or not you perform. You get to come into the workshop being a maybe on performing and then see how you feel towards the end. And you might perform and you might not, which can make it slightly challenging for me as the host and curator to be like, okay, so how many minutes does each person get? Whatever. But I don't care about that part. I care for folks to feel comfortable, for folks to feel like not pressured to produce anything. And if that became a barrier to entry, I would hate that. Like for me, it's a vital first step that folks can just feel comfortable going inward, which
Uh-huh.
is a bigger deal than you might imagine, right? Like the inward that we're going into is stuff that we might not have looked at before, stuff that we were told never, ever, ever to think or feel or say or act on. Like it's a very like tightly, like, like the trash compactor when it like squishes it all.
Yes.
It's like that. And it's just been there for a long time. So when we're going in and giving it some breathing room, like, I do prioritize that process being the most sacred and important one, and for folks to feel really safe in that part of things. The performance doesn't matter. The like, did you write a perfect I don't care about I don't think perfect stories are a thing. So like just the experience of it is the most important. Yeah, I think to me that would be the most important part of just like creating as much safety as I possibly can.
Have it. And I also love that you said that perfection is not something that we need to focus on. I saw that on your Instagram when I was doing the research as well. But I also saw that you had posted about people's questions or interactions. And so I want to ask, in teaching these workshops, what are a couple of interactions or encounters that stood out to you that were really impactful?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, literally 2 weeks ago, we're in the midst of a 5-week workshop series, and there's going to be a performance on July 25th because in Vancouver, Pride happens in early August.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, you know how like it's like San Francisco Pride happens in June and then Oakland's will happen later, like it's that kind of vibe, right? And so I decided to do a Queer Less Stories show the week leading up to Pride as like a kickoff, like that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we're in the midst of this 5-week workshop series. And the other thing we haven't talked about is I really welcome not just writers, but humans with a story to tell because humans have a lot of stories to tell. And with a slight bit of just like support and some basic like storytelling tips, people can write amazing things. And I've
Yeah.
taught so much writing to so many, like, regular folks over my life that I know how to do I know that's a thing, and I know how to support that. So this round, we have, I think, 8 or 9 storytellers, and I'm not sure if any of them have, like, whatever official writing background even means. Like, many of them have written in their journals, poets, like, performers, but not like they maybe I should say it like they don't identify as writers or as writers primarily, which is, like, my favorite thing, like, "Oh, let's go, let's do this," right? And, like, I know it's gonna go great, but watching them come in like, "Oh, do I have a story?" to, "I think I just wrote a thing," is such a cool evolution. So 2 weeks ago, we were on our third of 5 workshops, and it came time that people could share what they'd written so far. And I just set the stage with this will be half baked. We want it to be half baked. And we want to approach it like that, like 5-year-old kid. You know how when you're a kid, you just take a red crayon and you go like that, and you're like, look, it's art. Right. And I
Yes.
really emphasize that to counter the perfectionism shit that happens. And so I gave my little pep talk of like, let's just be 5-year-olds being like, look, it's a snowman kind of thing. And two people, like one after the other, were like, okay, I will share my story. I think I'm gonna die, but I'll share it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can imagine that it feels that way if you've never like written, let alone shared with other humans. And then
Yeah.
I started to read the most, like, well-formed, like, written, like, packing an emotional punch stories, and we were all floored. And then, I jokingly pointed out, like, "It looks like you didn't die, and you had this
Yes.
amazing story." And I think more than anything, what I'm seeing, like, ancestors gave me the thing, they were like, "Don't do scary stories, like, lust is where it's at, like, queer lust." So I just took it and ran, I was like, "Okay, got it, I believe you that this is the thing you want me to do." But what I didn't know then, but what I'm seeing is that the community piece, doing this together with other queer folks who want to explore this, who are just as nervous as you, who carry like religious trauma, like not that everyone does, but many of us do, who have like, and especially in the world of like folks of the global majority, like it's just like amplified by 10. So to be in a room with other folks who have somewhat similar baggage, for lack of a better word, like, it's so much easier. Like, it's not easy to write this stuff, but it's more supported, I would say, to do this exploration. And as soon as you see another person saying, "This is hard," it feels less hard. As soon as you hear another person telling a story, there's something in you that's like, "Okay, I'm gonna try." And in that
Yeah.
day, like, that first person who was like, "I'm gonna die, but okay." Like, it had that trickle effect of everyone sharing?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's there's something about creating a community where it's like, okay, I see this other person trying and they fell, but they didn't die.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, and I'm gonna try too. And then, oh my gosh, I didn't die. We're not dying. Let's do a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let's dive into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I again, I like that you bring up the ancestors telling you to focus on queer lust versus horror, which in my mind, also with my ancestry and background, I'm like, that's just more trauma. What is it like to be loved? What is it like to explore
Mhm.
queer stories that aren't really passed down from our ancestors because of religious trauma?
Oh my gosh,
um,
so many things. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so I love the story that you told about I think you had mentioned you're writing and then like this I think the proper term is like murder of crows. This flock of crows came and they were like pawing and stuff, and you're like, oh, am I doing the wrong thing? But then it's like, oh no, these stories need to be told. This is approval from my ancestors. Could you tell me a little bit more about that experience in that moment, what it felt like?
Yeah, it was one of the days when the workshop was going on, and I was sitting right by the window, and it was hot, so the window was open, and while folks were either doing some writing or they were in breakout rooms, the crows got super loud, and If you have spent a minute in Pakistan, like, there's a particular sound, it's just like a million crows in the sky, like, all day, it's just like the backdrop. So I always associate that with Pakistan, which is where I was born and grew up. But having that very, like, visceral auditory reminder in the middle of a queer love stories workshop, you know, my brain connected the 2 things, and my brain went back to that place of, "You shouldn't be talking about this stuff." Like, that ingrained, internalized homophobia, basically, it's like, it's always there, no matter how evolved one gets, no matter how, "Oh, I came out in Oakland, I'm all," there's no, like, it'll be there because in a way, it's what you've absorbed. But as I've also done my own, like, spiritual journey and evolved in that, and I haven't done, like, the deepest dive in ancestral work, but I feel very connected to, like, my actual ancestors and also my chosen ancestors who are, I can show you, Frida Kahlo, who I had been told in a, like, some kind of spiritual workshop I had been in that she's often a chosen ancestor, especially for queer disabled folks, and that had felt so right to me. And then my other queer ancestor is Freddie Mercury.
Okay.
He comes from the same, like, sort of community that I do, which is a teeny tiny South Asian community. And again, the queerness, the artist, n- n- I doubt being understood by, community. Like, I just really, and I always check in with them for the things that I'm doing, the things that I'm writing. Like, I do most of my writing at my altar, just being like, okay, you guide my pen, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I noticed that earlier, I meant to ask about this earlier, but I also noticed it came up again. You mentioned at your altar. Can you walk us through, like, what is your altar? What does it look like? Is this like it's a figure of speech, or is it like a literal place?
Yeah.
And how do you create that space?
Sure, yeah. It's a literal space. It's again, like, my time in Oakland was so special. Like, it really allowed me to become all the things I had always wanted to be. But again, representation, like, I didn't see any of that anywhere else until I got to Oakland, right? So my queerness got to evolve in the most, like, technicolor kind of a way. And then my spiritual practice, I learned through various, like, folks, again, of the global majority. And so what it's become now, it's like right here, like where I'm sitting at my desk. I really love, like, crystals and things. So I have a lot of different crystals that I use. You might have seen me, like, clutching this one in my hand. This one's for, like, what's that?
Oh no, I said nice. I didn't notice that earlier.
Yeah, this one's just to help me, like, connect to, like, my sort of throat chakra, like, am I speaking from my, like, personhood, like, integrity kinda thing. It's the one that I wanted today. It's got a lot of, like, plants, like, a lot of nice stones. I live really close to the beach, so lots of seashells and rocks and things like that. Like, a lot of different earth elements, which is a common kind of thing to bring into altars. And then, yeah, like the photos that I just showed you, just like things that honestly just help me feel connected to myself and supported, including ancestor type things, or like my tarot cards are right down over there. So if I pull a card and something really resonates, then I'll usually just, like, write it on my little clipboard I got from Michael's long ago. So
Nice.
whatever that reminder of the week or the month is, like, just to keep all these things in your visual, like, arena so that they're just sending little bursts of energy to you throughout the day kind of a thing. And then when it comes to, like, communicating with ancestors, like, again, back in Oakland, I don't even remember now because it was such a common, like, an accumulation of different workshops, different healers, and folks that I worked with, but they said, like, "Just sit and listen, and your ancestors will talk to you." And the first time I tried, I was like, "This is super weird, and how do I know that the voices coming through are not just my own brain making shit up?" And
Yeah.
then when the, like, trust part also comes in, of, like, trusting that what's coming through is ancestors. I don't know how else to put it because this is like what I know, like I don't know how
Yeah,
else to be like, this is ancestor, this is just your brain. Like I just have in my experience, trusting the process has really like made it a bigger impact in my life too.
yeah, that is huge. I think it's huge because, again, being within the queer space, at least for me, there's a fear of talking to ancestors. Don't get me wrong, like there's still the veneration and the lessons that they have taught, but I think there is a fear of connecting with because it's like, what if these people that I have looked up to, whose stories of strength and overcoming, reject me? And
Yes.
so to hear another queer person like, no, I actually took some time to talk to them, and they're like, do
Yeah.
this.
Well,
It's huge.
yes, and on that note, what I should have said, which directly answers your question, is I also believe, as many folks, I've heard many folks say that, when ancestors, like when the people from your family cross over, their earthly, like judgments and how they upheld systems goes away. And they are then their sort of essence, soul selves, right? Like, in whatever other realm, I don't think that there are like systems of oppression and patriarchy, so and homophobia. So they're not carrying that over. It just like from what I've understood, it just dissolves, and then it's just the essence of the ancestor. And it took me time to settle into that because, like what you just said, outside of Freddie and Frida, my actual ancestor that I connect to is my grandfather, who was a Pakistani man. And he passed before I came out. And initially, when all these things converged of like him passing, me coming out, etc., I would feel like that shame of like, what would he have said? Would he have accepted this about me? And so it was hard to turn to him and be like, let's chat kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
But and the other part of it, as I talk to you, the light that's turning on is, oh yeah, there's like we are not new to being queer or within our bodies or ourselves. And so like I am realizing like, no, there's probably like queer ancestors who are like, no, we want our story told.
yeah,
Get out there and do it because we've been waiting for someone to come along. So
okay.
there's that aspect too.
Okay. So that also makes me think of the thing I was gonna say and then I didn't, but I'll say now. So my grandmother, my God bless her, she is 101 and she's still here. And so in the last couple of years as my work or like the last year that my work shifted to queer lust stories. Again, that shame of like, how do I tell my 101-year-old Pakistani grandmother that I'm teaching this stuff would come
Mhm.
up a lot. And one day my partner was with me when we visited my grandma, and I don't know, just kind of to like, bug me a little. My partner's like, oh, Fee, why don't you tell Nani, my grandma, like, what event you're hosting? And that shame, that like, that like chest tension kind of thing came up. And then I was like, okay, well, Fee, how long are we going to carry this internalized stuff? Like, you're literally about to host an event. So very timidly, I was like, Nani, like, do you know what lust means? And I had to yell this because she's also very hard of hearing. So in the like seniors in the home, I was like, Nani, do you know what lust means? And this woman, she just goes, sure, sex. So what? What's the big deal? We've all done it. And then she went way further. She's like, how do you think your grandfather and I had 9 children? There was nothing else to do back then. So then she went on her own bender. And it turns out my grandma is really into talking about sex with me since I would say she turned 97 or so. And so it's like, and when you're 101, I don't know, I can't speak for her, but like you're closer to the other side, maybe. And
Yeah.
she's really like coming into her own like sexual evolution. And I think it's not unrelated to her granddaughter being like, I'm teaching this stuff. And so it's kind of opening up the doors for her to talk
Mhm.
about this stuff. And that's really like on this earthly plane proof that our elders and ancestors wanted to talk about this stuff. It was just like such a hard no back then.
Yeah. I love that. Also because again, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier is like we just assume at a certain point in time you stop caring about sex, which is not true. Like you're still human. So I feel like in a way it's also letting her like be a human and sorry, full experience of humanity in and of
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
Yeah. And also I have some family members that are a lot as they got a lot older, like they just did not care. Like they my grandparents my grandparents were very much like, that's how you two got here. And also my grandpa's like, I had a vasectomy, so I could keep doing that without having more kids. Like they no filter, did not care.
Yes.
Sorry, I realized that's probably an overshare, but
Oh, no. Trust me. The things my grandma's been telling me, that's nothing.
uh, and so speaking of like we're talking about parameters and stuff like that, I realize sometimes the stigma that we're given or the question that you pose, which I actually grew up with too, is like, what are your parents going to think? What are your ancestors going to think if you do X, Y, and Z? I realized that in a way it did do its job. It was supposed to help protect us from, society and help us survive the world in which our parents or our ancestors grew up. But now that we're out of that, those are parameters that aren't necessarily healthy to us. And so I wanted to know, like, what is your advice for writers who, are trying to get around these parameters? And yeah, what advice can you give them with like breaking past those and then reconnecting with themselves?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, I think that when we think about writing a story, especially around queer lust, our brains jump about 20 steps ahead to, I have to share this with my entire family. And then there's a big out. And then, yeah, we might not even start, let alone get very far. I think many of us have this assumption that if we write a thing on this end, 6 months later, when the thing is polished, it has to be shared with family. And so one piece of advice would be like to not even like not even like tell yourself no you don't have to because you might want to, but the advice would be to bring it way back here to step number 1 instead of step number 20, right? And that's what I teach in my workshops as well because this question comes up all the time. Like, not even just about sharing with family, but sharing with other folks in queer community or, queer communities are very small, so if you're writing about another person and then they might be at the event or whatever. So,
Yeah.
the best piece of, like, writing advice would be assume that the first draft is just for you. You can even tell yourself, "I will just write it down and then I will go to the sink and, like, set it on fire and just wash the ashes away." Your brain needs to hear that for a sense of safety, but really to settle into, that the first draft is for your eyes only. No one else needs to see it, not even me as the writing teacher. And that way, you're able to at least check in with yourself, like, what is the fuller scope of the story that I want to tell, the story that's inside of me? And then over the next many drafts, you can have like an internal negotiation of like, okay, so out of the whole enchilada, like, what do I want to say if I'm thinking about performing? Which pieces do I want to keep if I'm thinking about publishing in a zine? Like, you get to like play around with the bits of it depending on the context, but more than anything, like keeping your emotional safety as a priority.
Yeah.
And I feel like this also generally goes for, outside of queer lust writing as well. Like before queer lust stories, I was doing a lot of work with like writers who weren't writing, who were procrastinating. And this was one of the big like stumbling or blockages is like, what will people say when they read this? But again, that's like a year or 2 years down the road if you're writing a larger piece, but it's stopping you from writing anything at all. And one of the things I noticed just for myself was not many people in my family wanted to sit down and read my great, rough draft of my memoir or anything. Like, we get so worried about family, but in my case, they're not readers, at least not of my stuff. So the thing that I was worried about I don't know if it would have actually come to pass, but it just oftentimes stays as this like looming threat over our heads.
Yeah, I love that. So I love it because it does have you work the steps. I think okay, I'll speak for myself. I know whenever I get ready to work on a painting or something else, I kind of start with the intention of this is the show that I want to do it for, or this is the people that I want to see this. And sometimes, well, no, I'm not going to say sometimes, all the time, it gets me in my head to where I'm like, okay, this is just not going to be good. I'm just going to put it off. And this instead, it shrinks it back down to like, let's just take care of bite sized things at a time, and that'll get you through. Also, I love my family. They do like my paintings, but they're not asking to see every painting that I do.
Mhm.
They're like, "Oh, that's nice. Thank you so much." Like they're supportive. Don't get me wrong, but like they also have their own lives. So I like that this is reframing, and it's also kind of I think humbling in a way. It's like not everyone's going to read your stuff, and chances are your family's not going to want to read. So it's okay.
Yeah. And actually, what you just said about your process of when you're starting a painting, that's what I teach in the workshops. And we do a lengthy, like 1 hour deep dive in one of those 5 weeks, is to get really clear on your North Star. So, like, what is that guiding light, that fixed point in the sky? And what it's made up of for me is like your why. Why am I writing each of the pieces that you write, right? Like to get really specific. And then the other part of it is who am I writing for? And that those together make up the North Star so that when you're in the weeds and you're lost in like, what do I say? Or you're lost in another shame avalanche, you look up, there's your North Star. Oh, yeah, I'm writing for this kind of person. This is my why. When it comes to queer lust, like again, the chance you're writing for queer community and not for your straight family.
Yes, exactly. Which again, as you say, not for your straight family. Like I do. So the nice part is now in 2026, I have so many queer cousins, and sometimes some of the one in particular that I'm thinking of, he has zero filter, and there's stuff that I'll see him post on social media in terms of like what he's talking about. I'm like, great, but also I'm like, oh, we are kind of the same. Like there's a lot that we have in common, and the stuff that I feel shame about. I'm like, my other queer cousins, I'm like, oh yeah, like they're not going to judge me the same way. And so, I say that to say, as I think about what you've said about ancestors and telling the story and community, I think there is a vein where we need to tell these stories not just for ourselves, but we are in a way the ancestor. Like we're here present, but we're gonna be the ancestor. And so like what work are we gonna do for the next generation when they call on us so that we can say, oh yeah, hey, here's some stuff that we have for you.
Yes,
Uh,
and I think that when it comes to queer ancestors, like you have said a few times now, we don't necessarily or often have access to our own actual queer ancestors. And so as folks like me, you down the road are entering your like elderhood, yeah, like we are becoming the queer elders and then the queer ancestors. And then when it comes to these kinds of stories about like not just lust, but like longing, desire, how did you do the messiness of relationships, like whatever it is, and things also specifically queer, like like there's like a lot of folks about polyamory and polyamory and kink and play and celibacy, like asexuality, right? Like those are those are the things that the queer folks coming after us would want to be reading to get that sense of like belonging, good, like how do I live this? How do I live in
yes,
all of these ways?
love it. And yeah, we are setting the groundwork for what's coming next. One thing I wanted to ask, speaking of groundwork and things like that, I don't think I asked what was the story that got you into the space? Like, what was the queer story about lust or lust in general that got you into writing in the space?
Are you asking like what my first kind of
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And this also answers the question you were asking before we got on of like, yeah, the story that has the most traction or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so last summer, I was at a queer, like, love celebration, and I just literally over my shoulder told my friend this one-liner that became my first queer love story, and I just said something like, "Oh, yeah, like, a few months before my wedding, like, way back when to, like, a straight brown man. He asked if I wanted to watch The L Word with him, and I didn't know what to say because I'd already seen the show so many times while I was super closeted. And I just walked away to get my food, and my friend was like, "Oh my god, that sounds like such a powerful story." Um, and so that did become my first story. My first queer love story was, like, 4 months before my wedding. I'm in the middle of wedding planning. My then fiancé says, "Hey, like, we need a new show to watch in the evenings. Have you heard of this show, The L Word?" And I have this internal freak out because I had seen the show so many times in my 20s, and it used to have an extremely full body effect on me. And so what was really hard to write, and the thing that I carried so much shame around was that when I used to watch The L Word in my 20s, I lived with my parents, and I would basically, like, masturbate after every episode of The L Word in the family basement. And this
Oh,
one line was, like, the thing I never thought I would tell anybody ever. But
yeah.
when we did the workshop leading up to the first Queer Love Stories event, we were on a Zoom screen with other queer folks, and even when I first said, like, my fiance said, "Do you want to watch the L Word?" They all started laughing their faces off because they knew what that meant. So I was all feeling seen, and then when I said, "And then I had to touch myself in my parents' basement," they were, like, falling off their chairs laughing, and they got it, and that, like, was this immediate like when you empty the bathtub, all the shame just
Yes.
drained away that I had carried for 20 plus years. And I've told this story a bunch, and each time that people just start laughing, it's like it's become so normalized. And because I grew up so sheltered, like immigrant life sheltered, I didn't get to talk about this shit with other people growing up. And it turns out
Yeah.
like, the L word is such a gateway thing for so many folks, but I didn't know that because I didn't get to have those conversations back then. And
Yeah.
now over time, this story it just continues to grow. I share it at the workshop as a way to model, like, it's hard to write this stuff, but, like, relatable, all of that. And then people, like, add their own interpretations. Like, someone told me the other week, like, "Fee, your arc with this story is like Jenny from the show itself." Like, her in the first season, like, going from straight married girl to, like, fully out. So it just, yeah, has a life of its own now.
Yeah, it's funny as I watch different shows that were like queer code, like not queer coded, but actually that's not queer coded. That's like fully queer. There's no like codes in there. But I think for me it was Degrassi and seeing the queer characters, those who were closeted, trying to perform to expectations, while also what I say is like microdosing their sexuality. It's
Uh,
like as I go back and like I see people post different parts of the story, I'm like, oh wow, like there's a lot that we had in common there. They're like, and even then when I saw it and I felt like I related to the character, like you had mentioned earlier, I still didn't get it that I was gay. Like I didn't realize why I well, there's other stuff, but yeah. And so I do go back and watch, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I was gay. Like these were the signs. It was there.
and I don't know if you feel this way with Degrassi, but for all the years that I was binging on the L Word by myself in the family basement, again, there was this separation because, like, it's like skinny, mostly white, female bodied people in LA. So I'm like, okay, well,
Yes.
white girls get to be lesbians. I'm just doing this thing and then I'm going to carry on with my life. Like it's such a like that representation piece. Uh, it's become such a like toss away comment like, oh, representation matters, but my God, does it matter?
It does. It does. I will say to Degrassi's credit, and I also think because this is a Canadian production, and so there's a little less of what's going on here in the US, they did have like one brown body represented within their stories. But, at the same time, no, they had two. Now I think about it. But I think what happened is I was trying to watch it, and then my cousin, who's like my dad's generation, was there as we were watching it. My other cousins were there, his children, and he hit the wall. And that was like my lesson of you cannot be this. And so like I think that's where I kind of stopped watching the show because I was like, okay, well, whatever I'm feeling here, it can't be that, and so I cannot continue watching. And that kind of built in the shame, which is unfortunate. I don't think that was his intent.
Yeah.
I think it was at the time what he was seeing as protection. But yeah.
And
Anyway,
almost like this is just passed down automatic response behavior, right? Like when I
yeah.
think about my own uncles, my dad, like it's just like this automatic, and even my cousin who's
Yes.
my age is like the reflex response is that's bad, that's wrong, that's not normal. That's a direct
Yeah.
quote that I've heard, right? And so when we hear that, yeah, it gets absorbed.
Yeah. And again, bringing it back to your writing and the advice you give to writers, I still encounter and feel that feeling whenever I explore those themes within my own art. But, you know, as I hit that a little bit more, I feel like it's damping a little bit less. And as I create in community with other queer people, I see that happening a little bit less. And so I think my big takeaway from what I've learned from you is I just need to like bust through it and go for it. And then just see how it's received by other queer people because
Yeah.
that's where the healing's gonna lie.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just really rooting into that North Star of yours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so speaking of, my last question for you, it's kind of a North Star-esque question. But what song would describe your artistic practice right now?
Mm. Uh, Song related questions are always hard for me to answer because my musical taste is just all over the place. So these days, it's a lot of like Brazilian
Yes.
music, and I don't understand a word that they're saying, but there's something about connecting underneath language to just that like, pure creative energy that just really guides the flow.
I love it. Yeah, and that's my dad was a musician, so that's what I'm learning is like there's something about music that even if you don't understand what's happening, it's gonna get underneath those defenses and help you work some stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Feet, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And honestly, I think, as I mentioned earlier, and as your bio mentions, you are doing healing work. And so I can't wait for our listeners to listen to this because I know it's going to help them as much as it's helped me in this conversation, just to heal from shame, stigma, and be able to see ourselves more fully represented as queer people who experience lust and love. So I want to thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all the questions, all the like space that you're holding and the community you're helping us to build.
Yeah, absolutely. And then hopefully when I get up to Vancouver, I can check out. Oh, wait, Pride is next month. Yeah, so hopefully I can get up to Vancouver next month for Pride and check
That would
some
be
things out.
amazing, and I'm also taking this show on the road, so I'm in talks with folks in, like, across Canada, coming down to Seattle, like, I just want this to be everywhere because it's so important.
Yeah, I think before we did this, I had mentioned that I have a couple of queer writers within our gallery. If you bring it to Seattle, let me know because this is something that is right up their alley and
Amazing.
they'd love. Yeah, actually, I'd love. Hold on, I'm saying them. Let me think about myself for a second. I'd love to be in your workshop, so please let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.